Hello and welcome. My name is Alan and we are back with more. The Bhagavad Gita. We're still reading the introduction and we're going to continue into that even with if you hear them from time to time, there are some fireworks going off because it is the 4th. I don't know what we've got to celebrate with our supreme bench of idiots. Anyway, let's hop into this. The Upanishadic background. The Gita, naturally enough, takes for granted that its audience is familiar with the basic ideas of Hindu religious thought, almost all of which can be found in the Upanishads. It also uses some technical vocabulary from yoga's psychology. All this needs to be explained in contemporary terms if the modern reader is to grasp what is essential and timeless in the Gita's message and not to get bogged down in strange terminology. First, however, the non-Hindu faces a third obstacle. The multiplicity of names used for the aspects of God from the earliest times. Hinduism has proclaimed one God while accommodating worship of him or her. For the millions, God is the Divine Mother in many different names. Truth is one, says a famous verse of the Rig Veda. Some people call it by various names. Monastic devotees might find that Shiva embodies the austere detachment they seek. Devotees who want to live in the world partaking of its innocent pleasures but devoted to service of their fellow creatures might find in Krishna the perfect incarnation of their ideas. In every case, this clothing of the infinite in human form serves to focus a devotee's love and to provide an inspiring ideal. But whatever form is worshipped, it is only an aspect of the same one God. In the Gita, in fact, virtually everywhere in Hindu myth and sculpture, we also encounter the gods in the plural. These are the devas, deities which seem to have come in with the Aryans and which have recognizable counterparts in other Aryan-influenced cultures. Indra, god of war and storm. Varuna, god of waters and a moral overseer. Agni, god of fire, the Hermes-like intermediary between heaven and earth, and so on. The Gita refers to the devas as being worshipped by those who want to propitiate natural and supernatural powers in much the same way that ancestors were worshipped. In modern terms, they can best be understood by personifying the forces of nature. This question out of the way, we can proceed to the Upanishadic background the Gita assumes. Atman and Brahman. The Upanishads are not systemic philosophy, they are more like ecstatic slideshows of mystical experience, vivid, disjointed, stamped with the power of direct personal encounter and the divine. If they seem to embrace contradictions, that is because they do not try to smooth over the seams of these experiences. They simply set down what the rishis saw, viewing the ultimate reality from different levels of spiritual awareness, like snapshots of the same object from different angles. Now seeing God as utterly transcendent, for example, now seeing God as immanent as well. These differences are not important, and the Upanishads agree on their central ideas. Brahman, the Godhead; Atman, the divine core of personality; dharma, the law that expresses and maintains the unity of creation; karma, the web of cause and effect; samsara, the cycle of birth and death; moksha, the spiritual liberation that is life's supreme goal. Even while ancient India was making breakthroughs in the natural sciences and mathematics, the sages of the Upanishads were turning inward to analyze the data that nature presents to the mind. Penetrating below the senses, they found not a world of solid, separate objects, but a ceaseless process of change, matter coming together, dissolving, and coming together again in a different form. Below this flux of things with name and form, however, they found something changeless, an infinite, indivisible reality in which the transient data of the world cohere. They call this reality Brahman, the Godhead, the divine ground of existence. This analysis of the phenomenal world tallies well enough with contemporary physics. A physicist would remind us that the things we see out there are not ultimately separate from each other and from us. We perceive them as separate because of the limitations of our senses. If our eyes were sensitive to much finer spectrum, we might see the world as a continuous field of matter and energy. Nothing in this picture resembles a solid object in our usual sense of the word. The external world of physics, wrote Sir Arthur Eddington, has thus become a world of shadows. In removing our illusions, we remove the substance, for indeed we have seen that substance is one of the greatest of our illusions. Like the physicists, these ancient sages were seeking an invariant. They found it in Brahman. That in examining our knowledge of ourselves, the sages made a similar discovery. Instead of a single coherent personality, they found layer on layer of components: senses, emotions, will, intellect, ego, each in flux. At different times and in different company, the same person seems to have different personalities. Moods shift and flicker. Even in those who are emotionally stable, desires and opinions change with time. Change is the nature of the mind. The sages observed the flow of thoughts and sensations and asked, "Then where am I?" The parts do not add up to a whole, they just flow by. Like physical phenomena, the mind is a field of forces, no more or the seat of intelligence than radiation or gravity is. Just as the world dissolves into a sea of energy, the mind dissolves into a river of impressions and thoughts, a flow of fragmentary data that do not hold together. Western philosophers have reasoned their way to the similar conclusion, but with them it was an intellectual exercise. David Hume confesses that whenever he was forced to conclude that his empirical ego was insubstantial, he went out for a walk, had a good dinner, and forgot all about it. For these ancient sages, however, these were not logical conclusions, but personal discoveries. They were actually exploring the mind, testing each level of awareness by withdrawing consciousness to the level below. In profound meditation, they found when consciousness is so acutely focused that it is utterly withdrawn from the body and mind, it enters a kind of singularity in which the sense of a separate ego disappears. In this state, the supreme climax of meditation, the seers discovered a core of consciousness beyond time and change. They called it simply Atman, the self. I have described the discovery of Atman and Brahman, God immanent and God transcendent, as separate, but there is no real distinction. In the climax of meditation, the sages discovered unity, the same indivisible reality without and within. It was Advaita, not two. The Chandogya Upanishad says epigrammatically, Tat Tavam Asi, thou art that. Atman is Brahman. The self in each person is not different from the Godhead, nor is it different from person to person. The self is one, the same in every creature. This is not some peculiar tenet of the Hindu scriptures. It is the testimony of everyone who has undergone these experiments in the depths of consciousness and followed them through to the end. Here is Rusbrook, a great mystic of medieval Europe. Every word is most carefully chosen. The image of God is found essentially and personally in all mankind. Each possesses it whole, entire, and undivided, and altogether not more than one alone. In this way we are all one, intimately united in our eternal image, which is the image of God and the source in us of all our life. Maya. In the unitive experience, every trace of separateness disappears. Life is a seamless whole, but the body cannot remain in this state for long. After a while, awareness of mind and body returns, and then the conventional world of multiplicity rushes in again with such vigor and vividness that the memory of unity, though stamped with reality, seems as distant as a dream. The unitive state has to be entered over and over until a person is established in it. But once established, even in the midst of ordinary life, no one sees the one underlying the many, the eternal beneath the ephemeral. What is it that makes undivided reality appear to be a world of separate transient objects? What makes each of us believe that we are the body rather than our own self? The sages answered with a story still told after thousands of years. Imagine, they said, a man dreaming that he is being attacked by a tiger. His pulse will race, his fists will clench, his forehead will be wet with the dew of fear, all just as if the attack were real. He will be able to describe the look of the tiger, the way he smelled, the sound of his roar. For him, the tiger is real, and in a sense, he is not wrong. The evidence he has is not qualitatively different from the kind of evidence we trust when we are awake. People have even died from the physiological effects of a potent dream. Only when we wake up can we realize that our dream sensations, though real to our nervous system, are a lower level of reality than the waking state. The Upanishads delineate three ordinary states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. Each is real, but each has a higher order of reality. For beyond these three, the Upanishads say, is the unitive state, called simply the fourth, Turiya. Entering this state is similar to waking up out of dream sleep. The individual passes from a lower level of reality to a higher one. The sages called the dream of waking life the dream of separate, merely physical existence by a suggestive name, Maya. In general, use of the word meant a kind of magic, the power of a god or sorcerer to make things appear to be something else. In the Gita, Maya becomes the creative power of the Godhead, the primal creative energy that makes unity appear as the world of innumerable separate things with name and form. Later philosophers explain Maya in surprisingly contemporary terms. The mind, they said, observes the so-called outside world and sees its own structure. It reports that the world consists of a multiplicity of separate objects in a framework of time, space, and causality because these are the conditions of perception. In a word, the mind looks at unity and sees diversity. It looks at what is timeless and reports transience. And in fact, the precepts of its experience are diverse and transient on the level of experience. Separateness is real. Our mistake is in taking this for ultimate reality, like the dreamer thinking that nothing is real except his dream. Nowhere has this mysterious Eastern notion been formulated more succinctly than in the epigram of Ruysbroeck. We behold that what we are, and we are what we behold. When we look at the unity through the instruments of the mind, we see diversity. When the mind is transcended, we enter a higher mode of knowing, Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness, in which duality disappears. This does not mean, however, that the phenomenal world is an illusion or unreal. The illusion is a sense of separateness. Here again, we can illustrate from physics the world of name and form exists only as a condition of perception. At the subatomic level, separate phenomena dissolve into a flux of energy. The effect of Maya is similar. The world of the senses is real, but it must be known for what it is, unity appearing as multiplicity. Those who identify themselves with the conditions of perception in Maya wake up into a higher mode of knowing in which the unity of life is apprehended directly. The disciplines for achieving this are called yoga. As it is the state of union. The word comes from the root yuj, to yoke or bind together. The experience itself, properly speaking, it is beyond experience. It is called samadhi, and the state attained is moksha or nirvana, both of which will signify going beyond the conditioning of Maya, time, space, and causality. In this state, we realize that we are not a physical creature, but the Atman, the Self, and thus not separate from God. We see the world not as pieces, but whole, and we see that whole as a manifestation of God. Once identified with the self, we know that although the body will die, we will not die. Our awareness of this identity is not ruptured by the death of the physical body. Thus, we realized that the essential immortality, which is the birthright of every human being, to such a person, the Gita says, death is no more traumatic than taking off an old coat. Life cannot offer any higher realization. The supreme goal of human existence has been attained. The man or woman who realizes God has everything and lacks nothing. Having this, they desire nothing else and cannot be shaken by the heaviest burden of sorrow. Life cannot threaten such a person. All it holds is the opportunity to love, to serve, and to give. Dharma, karma, rebirth, and liberation. It has been said that if you understand just two words, dharma and karma, you will have grasped the essence of Hinduism. This is a simplification, but it would be difficult to exaggerate the importance of these concepts. Both are deeply embedded in Hindu thought, and the Gita, like other Hindu scriptures, takes them for granted. Not as a theoretical premises, but as facts of life that can be verified in personal experience. The word dharma means many things, but its underlying sense is that which supports, from the root dri, to support, hold up, or bear. Generally, dharma implies support from within, the essence of a thing, its virtue, that which makes it what it is. An old story illumines this meaning with the highest ideal of Hinduism. A sage seated beside the Ganges noticed a scorpion that had fallen into the water. He reaches down and rescues it, only to be stung. Some time later, he looks down and sees a scorpion thrashing about in the water again. Once again, he reaches down to rescue it, and once more he is stung. A bystander, observing all this, exclaims, "Holy One, why do you keep doing that? Don't you see that the wretched creature will only sting you in return?" "Of course," the sage replied. "It is the dharma of the scorpion to sting, but it is the dharma of a human being to save." On a larger scale, dharma means the essential order of things, and integrity and harmony in the universe and the affairs of life that cannot be disturbed without courting chaos. Thus it means rightness, justice, goodness, purpose, rather than chance. Underlying this idea is the oneness of life, an Upanishadic discovery that all things are interconnected because at its deepest level creation is indivisible. This oneness bestows a basic balance on the whole of nature, such that any disturbance in one place has to send ripples everywhere, as a perfect bubble, touched lightly in one place, trembles all over until balance is restored. The implications are caught perfectly by these famous lines from John Donne, which deserve to be read now with a fresh eye, as not merely great rhetoric, but a faithful representation of reality. "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main, if a clod be washed away by the sea. Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." There is an ancient Sanskrit epigram, "Ahimsa paramo dharma." The highest dharma is ahimsa, non-violence, universal love for all living creatures. For every kind of violence is a violation of dharma, the fundamental law of the unity of life. Thus, every act or thought has consequences which themselves will have consequences. Life is the most intricate web of interconnections. This is the law of karma, one of the most important and least understood ideas in ancient Indian thought. Karma is repeated so often in the Gita that I want to illustrate it in some detail. Some intuitive sense of karma as an organic law makes Krishna's teachings a good deal clearer. Literally, the Sanskrit karma means something that is done. Often it can be translated as deed or action. The law of karma, states simply that every event is both a cause and an effect. Every act has consequences of a similar kind, which in turn have further consequences, and so on. And every act, every karma, is also the consequence of some previous karma. This refers not only to physical action, but to mental activity as well. In their analyses of the phenomenal world and the world within, the sages of the Upanishads found that there is not merely an accidental, but an essential relationship between mental and physical activity given appropriate conditions to develop further thoughts and breed actions of the same kind, as a seed can grow only into one particular kind of tree. Baldly put, the law of karma says that whatever you do will come back to you. No one, of course, has the omniscience to see the picture fully, but the idea of a network of connections, far from being occult, is natural and plausible. The law of karma states unequivocally that though we cannot see the connections, we can be sure that everything that happens to us, good and bad, originated once in something we did or thought. We ourselves are responsible for what happens to us, whether or not we can understand how. It follows that we can change what happens to us by changing ourselves. We can take our destiny into our own hands. The physical side of karma, however, only touches the surface of life. To get an inkling of how karma really works, we have to consider the mind. Everything we do produces karma in the mind. In fact, it is the mind rather than the world that karma seeds are planted. Aptly, Indian philosophy compares a thought to a seed, very tiny, but it can grow into huge, deep-rooted, wide-spreading tree. I have seen places where a seed in the crack of pavement grew into a tree that tore up the sidewalk. It is difficult to remove such a tree, and terribly difficult to undo the effects of a lifetime of negative thinking, which can extend into many other people's lives. But it can be done, and the purpose of the Gita is to show how. Karma is sometimes considered punitive, a matter of getting one's just desserts. This is accurate enough, but it is much more illuminating to consider karma an educative favor or force whose purpose is to teach an individual to act in harmony with dharma, not to pursue selfish interests at the expense of others, but to contribute to life and consider the welfare of the whole. In this sense, life is like a school. One can learn, one can graduate, one can skip a grade or stay behind. As long as a debt of karma remains, however, a person has to keep coming back for further education. That is the basis of samsara, the cycle of birth and death. A good many wrong and misleading words have been written on this subject, largely because of the fascination it seems to hold in the West. Rightly understood, however, reincarnation is not exotic, but quite natural. If personality consists of several sheaths, the body being only the outermost, there is no reason why personality should die when the body is shed. The sages of the Upanishads saw personality as a field of forces. Packets of karma to them were forces that have to work themselves out. If the process is interrupted by death, those forces remain until conditions allow them to work again in a new context. Again, sleep can illustrate the dynamics of this ideal. In sleep, a person passes in and out of two stages, dreaming and dreamless sleep. In the first, consciousness is withdrawn from the body and senses, but still engaged in the mind. In dreamless sleep, however, consciousness is withdrawn from the mind as well. Then the thinking process, even the sense of I, is temporarily suspended and consciousness is said to rest in the self. In this state, a person ceases to be a separate creature, a separate personality. In dreamless sleep, the Upanishads say a king is not a king, nor a pauper poor. No one is old or young, male or female, educated or ignorant. When consciousness returns to the mind, however, the thinking process starts up again and personality returns to the body. According to this analysis, the ego dies every night. Every morning we pick up our desires where we left off. The same person, yet a little different too. The Upanishads describe dying as a very similar process. Consciousness is withdrawn from the body into the senses, from the senses into the mind, and finally consolidated in the ego when the body is finally wrenched away. The ego remains a potent package of desires and karma, and as our last waking thoughts shape our dreams, the contents of the unconscious at the time of death, the residue of all that we have thought and desired and lived for in the past determine the context of our next life. We take a body again, the sages say, to come back to just the conditions where our desires and karma can be fulfilled. The self-realized person, however, has no karma to work out, no personal desires at the time of death. He or she is absorbed into the Lord. But they for whom I am the supreme go, who do all work, renouncing self for me, and meditate on me with single-hearted devotion. These I will swiftly rescue from the fragment cycle of birth and death, for their consciousness has entered into me. Such a person, the Upanishads stress, can actually shed the body voluntarily when the hour of death arrives, by withdrawing consciousness step by step in full awareness. Some of the Gita's most fascinating verses, for those who can interpret them, are Krishna's instruction on how to die. But we'll go ahead and leave this episode here, because it's already over half an hour. But we're getting some ideas of the other ideations of Hinduism and Indian religion. So, while it's often thought of as polytheistic, it's also, in a way, monotheistic. Which is interesting. Although they're all God, they're different forms. And I believe it's Krishna that was supposed to be, or Sri Krishna was supposed to be the ultimate form, the true form. If I am understanding things correctly. But yeah, if it is not just physical activities, which I'm fine on, it's mental that I have a lot to work on. Because rage is a big part of who I am. And it often expunges certain thoughts into the openness from within. So yeah, I have mental karma to clean, I guess you could say. Physically, I'm not bad off. I don't try to hurt anyone. Or do ill. You know, it's just part of who I am, but it's like, if you're out grocery shopping, if I have a buggy full and someone's behind me that's only carried an item or two, I'm like, get in front of me. You've only got a couple things. It ain't going to take you long. You're perfectly fine. Get in front. Because there's no sense in them having to wait when the fact is they'll be done quickly. It's just, one of those things. Because honestly, I feel acts of kindness, no matter how small, can help and can sometimes push a person to go from feeling stressed to feeling kind of in the middle. The less the more stress you are able to help shift off a person's heart does a lot. You don't have to sit down and talk. You can if you want to. I've done that too. Because I often talk about a homeless man I knew at Little Caesars. I went in, got some crazy bread and pizza, and I was going to offer it to the man, but he already apparently had been given something by the store, people in the store, so. But we sat down and talked for a little bit. He says because no one pays attention, and he cried a bit. He's like, thank you for, sitting down to talk to me. And it's just one of those things. You don't have to sit down and talk to everybody, but anything, that's not going to hurt you, you can sit there and be, kindness. It makes other people's day a little better. And I guess in a sense, I almost feel it's karmatic because you feel honestly, I want to feel that it would come back around. But yeah, mental karma. Like I said, I've got rage issues. So that I struggle with a little more. It often causes me to spew forth things I shouldn't say, thoughts I shouldn't express. But oh, that's one thing about being rage-filled. Even though usually it's people that do evil unto others that enrages me so much. It's still like, you shouldn't espouse forth such evil. And I understand, after I've had time to breathe and think and cool down, I know it's wrong. But, you know, sometimes you just have to express it. Like before making this video, I made a video on the way homelessness is being criminalized. Thanks to our Nacho Supreme Grande. That's what I call this backbench of morons. Cue the Benny Hill theme. That's what they should come out to. But yeah. That's being nice compared to some things I've said about them, though. Yeah. But it's because these kind of people do things that hurt others that the rage boils and spews forth. It's still not right, but fuck. Anyway, I've done went on long enough on this video. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.